All right, guys, hopefully you warmed up your brains a little bit and did your biome project on Thursday. If you didn't do your coloring project, it was one of the easiest assignments you probably could have done all semester, so get it done before this coming Thursday so that you're not missing an assignment right as the 9 weeks start. Remember, if you want to get on top of your grades, you better start now. But if you're watching this video, you're already doing that, so good job. We're going to talk about biomes a little bit more today, and then we're going to move on. So we've talked about biomes and climate already, just in a general sense, because we studied climate change, and the way that climate normally should work was something we needed to know before we could talk about how it's not working or how we're changing it. So we talked about this a little bit, but we've got to talk about biomes before we can really move into our ecosystems, which, by the way, is our last unit of the year. We've almost done it. I'm really proud of you guys, and we're going to make it through this year. But before we can get to the end of the year, we've got to learn about ecology, so let's get started. Biomes, just a reminder, the definition right here, which goes in your notes, are ecosystems of the world. No, that's not the definition. Yeah, it is. Ecosystems of the world are classified into classes called biomes. We've talked about them, we've studied them, we've looked at them before. Here's a quick overview of what they are. They're classified according to their plant life because the plants that grow in an area determine what animals live there. That's really common. So if I don't have any plants, my animals, there's not going to be a lot of animals. At the same time, if I had a lot of like green leafy plants, I'm going to have a lot of animals that eat green leafy plants. If I've got a lot of like woody plants, I'm going to have a food web and system that starts on organisms that eat that woody tissue like bugs. So the types of plants, just like the slide says, that we have in an ecosystem, that's really what's going to determine the animals that live there. If you remember from 8th grade studying ecology, you should have learned that plants, or the producers, which are not always plants by the way, are the base of our ecosystem. So if we don't have those, or depending on what kind we have, determines everything else up in the system. So producers are first. They're going to determine what kind of animals we have. What other things determine biomes? Biomes can be determined by biotic or living things and abiotic factors. So biotic factors, again, are those living things, so like animals and plants. And if you aren't thinking of animals as in bugs too, think about bugs. Plants, don't forget, we've got our phytoplankton too, like our photosynthetic little organisms that do photosynthesis in the ocean. They're the base of many of our ocean food webs. And also abiotic factors as well. So abiotic means non-living, biotic means living. Abiotic factors are things like temperature, rainfall, altitude, latitude, etc. So that general climate of the area. So this is where you get interactive, and hopefully you can recall tropical rainforests. So what are some biotic factors and what are some abiotic factors? So if you can't already list 2 for each category, you're going to need to go ahead and Google those. If you don't have them put into your notes, then I'm going to take off points. So you're going to want to do this. If you don't do it and you leave the section of your notes blank, I'm not going to give you credit for the notes. So please do this. Hopefully you can identify some things that live in a rainforest. What are some kind of plants that we see? What are some kind of animals that we'd expect to see there? And then what are the abiotic factors, or what's the climate like? Is it rainy, perhaps? Is it warm? Is it cold? Do I have a lack of rain? Hopefully you're able to identify that, especially because we've studied biomes before and you researched them to do your project on Thursday. Our temperate forest, same question. So what are some biotic factors? What are the things that live in our temperate forest? And by the way, you live in a temperate forest, so what are some things that live here? By the way, do not put humans, because humans live in all of the biomes of the world, because we have adapted to be able to, and if we didn't adapt, we did things like bought coats to live there. So humans don't count. But what are some biotic factors? What are some living things in temperate forests? You live there. Again, what are the abiotic factors? So what's the temperature like? Do we have seasons? Do we not have seasons? Do we get average rainfall? Do we not get any rain at all? Tell me that. Our next biome here is the taiga, or sometimes called the boreal forest. This one, I want you to think like Canada region. And it's, well, can't tell you what it is because you should have already researched this. So what are some living things that live there? Biotic factors. What kind of animals do we expect to see there? What kind of plants do we expect to see there? What are some abiotic factors? are non-living things. So what's the temperature like? You can tell me the latitude. That'd be pretty easy with that map right there. And then we're moving again. So our savannas. So what are some living things that you find there? What kind of animals and plants do you expect to see there? And then again, what are our abiotic factors? Our non-living things like temperature, rainfall, latitude, general region of the world. Any of those would do. Next, we've got our temperate grasslands. So these are our biotic factor, or not, sorry, no, these aren't our biotic factors. List some biotic factors for me. So what are some living things that we'd expect to see in a grassland? And then our abiotic factors. So what are some non-living things that we expect to see? What do you notice about the map right there? Where are they mostly located? Our shrubland, or shrubland, which can also be called grassland as well. What are some biotic factors? What are some living things? We don't see many of these. I guess this wouldn't be a grassland. This would be a shrubland. We really don't have, it's about like California areas where we would see these in the US. What are some abiotic factors? Or non-living things? Here's our deserts. So what are some biotic factors? What kind of things would you expect to find in a desert? Living things. And then abiotic factors. Where do you notice they're mostly congregated? Or where's the biggest desert that you can see here? Where is that latitudinally? What's that around? Do we expect to see a lot of rain here? Or do we expect to see a lot of evaporation? And then our tundras. So what are our biotic factors? What kind of things live in the tundra? And then our abiotic factors are non-living things. So what's the temperature like here? What's the average rainfall? Tell me that. Where are they located latitudinally? Are they near the equator? Are they near the poles? And then lastly, our soil. So we're going to go through these. I'm not exactly sure where your notes cut off. They'll cut off eventually though. Soil plays a big part in our biomes and what's able to live there. Soil type is affected by the type of bedrock upon which it sits. Just a reminder from our NC Geology, we sit on sedimentary bedrock here in the coastal region or the coastal plains of North Carolina. And then not only the bedrock, but the amount of physical and chemical weathering that it undergoes. So if you have an area that has a lot of weathering, generally it's going to have thicker soil. Perhaps if it's got a lot of erosion though, it's not going to have thick soil. So it just depends on where you are. Soil changes over time. As you know, we've talked about this a little bit, especially when we studied the lithosphere. What are some kind of things that you think affect our soil? Hopefully farming has gone through your head. So what we farm or put on the land, so if we construct, our soil is going to go down, our soil quality, right? If we farm the land, we're going to see a lot of our nutrients being drained from it. If it's got a little vegetation, we're going to see a lot of erosion, and then eventually our soil would become really, really rocky. So lots of things can change our soil. Our North Carolina soil type is called Cecil. Cecil is found above granite rock. This is found more in our mountain regions. We don't really have this reddish soil. We can see a little bit of it, but not a lot, because we're sitting over sedimentary. It has a thick red subsoil. You can see it right there on that soil sample. So it's a redder color. We here in the coastal plains don't really have as much Cecil as other regions might have. Ours is pretty sandy, but as far as generally in North Carolina, we have Cecil soil. And then just a reminder, in each biome, plants and animals have adapted to specific environmental conditions. These conditions can be threatened by human activities. It just depends on what the humans are doing. So what this slide is trying to tell you, or what I want you to get out of this, is that animals and plants have adapted to where they are in biome-wise. So if I take a tropical rainforest organism and I try to take it to like the tundra, it's not going to live. The conditions aren't right for it. This is something that you specifically need to keep in mind. We're going to start studying invasive species pretty soon here. And one of the things that humans love to do is to take organisms from one place to another because they think they're cool. like they want them as pets, and then eventually they realize, oh, that's not a good pet, and so they just release it. And sometimes the animal won't be able to survive because it's not in the right area. The conditions, like maybe it's a warm water, a fish, I don't know, say I released it and I live in Ohio, so it dies because it's too cold. But sometimes when I release those pets or what have you in the environment, they thrive. And one of the things we're going to learn with invasive species is that they don't really have any natural predators, which means that their population is pretty much unchecked. That can cause devastating effects on the ecosystem. The invasive species can eat the food of our native species, making our native populations decline. They could hunt the native species, making that population decline, or they could even perhaps crossbreed with our native species, creating a kind of hybrid or a mutant that we don't really know what it can do. So that's a topic for another day, though. We're going to study invasive species when we come back from break. And by the way, I've got a pretty cool song about it, so you better warm up your singing pipes, your voices, your vocal cords over spring break, so you better practice for that. And then just a reminder, just like humans are affecting the lithosphere and changing things, humans do have devastating effects on the environment as well. We learned that with climate change, but also just like building things, urbanization, building cities and industrial things like factories can really wreak havoc on the ecosystems. We talked about that in the hydrosphere. We talked about that in the lithosphere. So it's just really important that you become mindful citizens, environmental citizens specifically, and you start thinking about your activities and how they affect the environment, because it might not always be around. One of the key things that you should learn from this class overall is to just be a little bit more environmentally conscious. We want you to know that the actions that you have are affecting the rest of the world, be that humans or animals, plants, what have you, the living things of the world, and sometimes non-living as well. But again, that's a topic for another day, but I just want you to remember that your human activities can threaten native wildlife. All right, that is the end of these notes. Remember, if you didn't come up with abiotic or biotic factors, you better find some on Google or do your research. That is important and needs to be in your notes. Here's an overview of those biomes that we talked about and where they are on the earth, so you can see how they relate to one another. And then we are going to do this activity in class, but you can't really do it at home, so this is all you have to do today. Have a great day, guys, and if you have questions, as always, please email me.